Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Young Musician's Guide, Season 3, Episode 2. Today, we have host of his own podcast, phenomenal tuba player in his own right, an awesome guy. We have Andrew Hitz joining us today. But before we get into that, I want to remind everybody that this podcast is actually brought to viewers like you. Thank you so much to the Patreon supporters for helping me fund this podcast as well as the YouTube content I make. If you're interested in joining that, links are going to be in the description on the YouTube page as well as on the website and anywhere that you can get an in-depth description. If you're listening to this on a device, just check out my website, akcyouth.com. So a big thank you to the patrons. Also, if you happen to be interested in bringing on a certain person, of course, Andrew is a tuba person. A lot of the people I'm going to have on here are going to be tuba people because those are the circles I run in. Those are the people I know. Thankfully, most of the guests that come on here are just people I already know who say yes. So if you have anybody specific that you'd like to nominate, reach out to me on any of the socials. I'm at AKCEUPH on everything. Reach out to me or tell them to reach out to me if they are interested in coming on for the spring part of the third season. But yeah, Andrew and I get into some of the activities that he's involved in and what he's been doing with Pedal Note Media and the summer camp that they were just kind of put on, as well as, things with the entrepreneurial musician and the brass junkies and all that kind of stuff. So let's go ahead and dive into it. This is episode 3 with our special guest, Andrew Hitz. I have a backlog of probably 5 polos that I wear on a regular basis anytime I'm on camera. As your normal white guy does.
Right.
So
yeah, you got polo shirts and you got a podcast. Like you're checking like all the white guy boxes. Like maybe throw in a little disc golf. There's a few other things you got. Maybe a sourdough starter, and then you're hitting for the cycle. If
it wasn't for the fact that I might get eaten by an alligator while I play disc golf, I would totally be about it.
Is that.
But I don't want to be another Florida man story.
Yeah.
So how bad are you missing how bad are you missing sports right now?
Pretty bad. Yeah, pretty bad. Although it's funny, less bad than at first. When baseball didn't open, I was pretty devastated. I mean, I knew it was coming since before they canceled it. It was pretty obvious that it wasn't going to happen. But yeah, I'm missing it pretty bad. I mean, it's just kind of become normal now, which is weird. Yeah. I have this weird, I have no expectations for baseball at all, but I have a very, very oddly specific need, which is that if there is a one-game season, then the Red Sox get under the luxury tax threshold and reset it, and then they are in the pool for Springer and Real Muto and all those guys next year. There's a huge class. If 0 games happen, then they're not, and then they're fucked. So I'm looking for I'm looking for 2 things: for nobody to die and for a 1-game season. The whole thing could be canceled the next day, and that's really what I need practically out of it. I would love to see. I mean, it's not going to be a real World Series type victor anyway. I mean, but yeah, it'd be great if it could happen, but I'm not sure it's the best idea.
And you're in DC right now, right?
I am in DC. Yep.
But so. Is it awkward being around? I mean, do national fans exist? Is that a thing?
They do. Yeah, it's actually a pretty good baseball town. Yeah, it really is. Yeah, no, I was happy for them. Yeah,
I mean, I grew up an Orioles fan, always have been.
Right.
And, as soon as, I would support a hometown team, but as soon as Tampa gets a baseball team, somebody let me know and, I'll watch them. But yeah, I hear St. Pete's got a team that's made the playoffs once or twice, but.
Yeah, they were going to be really good this year. Yeah, they were going to be really good.
Well, as you know, as a fellow fan of the AL East, you know that it's always going to be Toronto's year, and it's always going to be Tampa's year, and it never is.
Yeah, although Tampa scared me a lot this year. Their pitching is incredible. So, I mean, they lose it all, but yeah, we'll see. Yeah, Toronto's got a lot of young talent right now, but whether they can put together at the same time before they all leave is always the question. So
you just got done with the academy, right?
We did, although we're announcing that there's going to be a bonus day to that, which is 2 Tuesdays from now. Not 2 Tuesdays, 2 weeks from tomorrow. is going to be one more day with Chris Castellanos on horn and Rex Richardson on trumpet, and then one more hang. And that's just included for anybody that's already purchased it, and it's still available till September 1st. But yes, we did just finish that. Yeah, it was great.
So is it only available to people who purchase the Academy at all, or can people jump in just for this day?
We are also, between now and September 1st, we're offering it for the whole thing for $59. So,
nice.
Yep. So,
Nice.
Yeah.
And how was the whole Academy? Because this is the founding year, right? This was the first go at it.
This was the first go at it. It went really well. Yeah, really well. Had a lot of people sign up. The faculty all loved it. It went smoothly. Yeah, it went really well.
And that's all through Brass Junkies, correct?
That is all through Brass Junkies. Yep.
So can you fill in? So what exactly is Brass Junkies? Could you guys kind of dabble in some sorts of things? Is it just you and Lance, or is it?
It is. Yeah. The Brass Junkies. The Brass Junkies is a podcast which is hosted by myself and Lance LeDuc, and then we are the umbrella organization is Pedal Note Media, and we are starting to do live events. And by live, I of course mean like right now, I'm wearing a for me is a nice shirt, and I'm wearing pajama bottoms. Like for real. The no joke, over the last 4 months, my dog, I'm not making this up, that when I grab a pair of pants, my dog gets off the couch and stretches because she knows she's going to get walked. Because that's basically the only reason why I put on pants is to walk the dog. So
that's going to be real awkward when you guys go get groceries then.
Well, we get our groceries delivered, so we got
okay.
we got a Wegmans right up the street, and we just do a big order each week. So
I haven't heard that name since I left Virginia. Man,
we have like a mothership Wegmans right up the street. So
really,
yep, that's got everything. So
I've consumed a lot of the stuff that you and Lance do, but I have no idea. So how did that hive mind start? How did it go? And did it start? Did you guys start the podcast and then you were like, okay, we need to put this under an umbrella? Did you go ahead and start with the business? How did that all begin?
So the summer of 2013, which was a month before Lance left Boston Brass and was 5 months before I left Boston Brass, we had the Boston Brass summer camp was out at Mesa State College out in Colorado, and in Gunnison, and we did what's called a business model canvas, which is something that I now teach in my entrepreneurial musician class at Shenandoah Conservatory. We figured out what we wanted to do for our next project. This involved like poster boards. Like we were staying in a dorm. We had an entire suite. It was just Lance and I in this 4 or 5 bedroom suite, on the campus. And so we each had our own room, but then out in the main, the common area, we had poster boards up on the wall, and you use Post-it notes to figure out what your, basically it's a process that helps you figure out what your unfair advantage is. And what we figured out our unfair advantages in a business sense is that that we have access to a lot of famous brass players just through circumstance that they're colleagues. It's funny, some of them used to be my heroes when I was a kid, and they've since become colleagues and friends, which is a kind of cool thing about the music business, how that can work. But most people can't text Joe Alessi because they don't have his number, and if they do, he's not going to text them back. Whereas we know Joe, and so we can say, hey, would you be up for interviewing? He goes, absolutely, you name the time and place. So that was our first unfair advantage, was that we had access to really fascinating people that other people would also want access to. And so that was our first offering under the Pedal Note Media umbrella, which we didn't have a huge plan for Pedal Note Media. We knew that we wanted to produce content. And we started every other week, and this was a long time ago now that this thing started. I think we recorded an episode. I think it came out in 2015, I think, was when we recorded an episode in 2014 and then did nothing with it. But since we launched the first one, which was actually Ryan Anthony, was episode 1, when he announced Cancer Blows, we have every other Tuesday morning. There have been 2 times when it has been late, just a little bit, like a few hours late. Otherwise, 4 a.m. Eastern, every other Tuesday since April of 2015. It comes out, every other week. We're now up to episode 141. So, and then TEM started shortly thereafter, which TEM is weekly, although that's just me, and that kind of ebbs and flows a little bit. June was just the first month that, since I started that 5 years ago, that there was 0 episodes. I'm home with a kid who doesn't have any kids to play with, so I'm playing with him a lot, and my wife is trying to navigate being a public school teacher and what that's going to look like, and we're just all living on top of one another. And we had this summer workshop, which was this gigantic undertaking, and there's just been a lot of I haven't been sitting around and I'm just not feeling it. I'm just like, I'm not feeling it at 10 p.m. when I have an opening, and so and I should do another one pretty soon, but so that one's a little bit more organic, although that one's got 211 episodes and Brass Junkies has 141.
Well, you also do reaction episodes and reflection episodes and talking about single topics just on your own. It's not all interview
correct.
Most are. So that it's easy probably to build that up too.
Yep, it is. Yeah, that's something that has evolved actually for both podcasts. Is the formats have evolved a little bit, and we're it's funny, the summer workshop was a huge success, which we're super proud of, but if we had just even one bullet point for every idea that we've had over the last 6 or maybe even call it 7 or 8 years, because we started thinking about this stuff long before we even did that business model canvas, and then it was another year and a half before we launched the thing. If we had a list of the ideas that either went nowhere or were bad ideas or the right idea at the wrong time or the right idea at the right time that we didn't execute, or what, it would be a long, that was a Google Doc that was shared, it'd be 14 pages long. I'm not kidding. So the key to having great ideas is having lots of ideas, and you're not going to figure out exactly what the frequency of a podcast is and exactly what the format should be and exactly all of that stuff right away, or whether it even should be a podcast, or should it be a YouTube channel, or should it be books, or should it be live events, or and you don't know until you do it. And if you start a podcast and you start interviewing people and you realize you don't like it, then then stop. But that's the beautiful thing about working for yourself, is that you can hit pause like I just did for the last month. If I was doing the Entrepreneurial Musician, which is the name of a class at Shenandoah that I created, but that's not, that's 100% my intellectual property. If I was doing that for Shenandoah Conservatory, maybe I could have taken the month off, but there would have been emails, and I would have had to have asked permission from someone to not be, There was none of that. It was just no. Every night my kid and I are going exploring, as we call it, which there are tons of office parks near here, and they're all completely empty right now because nobody is working in offices. And every night we are going around 8 p.m. as the sun is setting, and he's got his scooter and I have my bike, and we are riding around parking garages and parking lots and having battles and racing. And somehow he always puts up his shield before I fire anything at him 100% of the time, which is funny how that works when you're 6. But if I said no to that one night a week, then I could easily spit out a TEM episode. I'm not interested in doing that right now, and that's one of the things that's nice about working for yourself is right now I want to do that with him 7 days a week, which might sound crazy to you, and that's fine. That's okay, or to you or whoever's listening. But you get to kind of define success for yourself and what that looks like. And right now, I'm my kid's buddy, and I'm also his dad. It's a line you got to toe, but because he hasn't been in school since the beginning of March, so it's I'm trying to play more with him. So and that's the beauty of calling your own shots, right? You can shut a podcast down for a year and great, and some people will hopefully miss it. But yeah, you get to just do that. You don't just get to decide like, I don't feel like rehearsing with the National Symphony this morning, but I'll be there tomorrow. They'll be like, actually, you'll be there never again. Thank you so much for your time. But when you work for yourself, which is a lot harder in some ways, but you get to make decisions like that, which is empowering.
Well, all right. So there's a lot to unpack there, but I want to go back to you and Lance being two grown men in a college dorm and and pitching ideas back and forth on one another.
Sure.
And so, like, I just think about it like as me, if I were to go like with like one of my best buddies and because you guys worked together previously, but I assume you also were friends. Like you have that
very much so.
And so how awkward is it to start that? Like, was it awkward to start that conversation, or is that just like the way the two of you are? Because I can't imagine just like hanging out in a dorm room with my friend after working the day and being like, "Hey, man, you want to start a business?
Let's do a business model canvas."
Yeah.
No, Lance and I used to travel together in a car. Like there was like a van for the last few years, the van that the other three guys tended to be in, and Lance and I were in a full-size car. So we spent hours and hours and hours together on the road, like hours. And we both decided that we wanted to maintain some kind of a professional relationship, and then we needed to figure out what that was looking like. And there were a lot of factors there, too. I mean, I traveled the world for 14 years, which was amazing. But it was maybe about a year before I left that I had emergency repair shop visits, meaning that like my tuba, when I landed and opened it up at the airport, like the valves weren't moving. One valve or multiple valves weren't moving. I had emergency repair shop visits all within 1 month in Anchorage, Alaska, Linz, Austria, and Hong Kong. Like that was within 30 days, and it was like the first one I was like not happy, and the second one I was ready to just like burn the airport down, and the third one I was so mad I like didn't even get mad. That's when the rest of the band was like, "We should back up. Yeah, like this is not good. Like he's showing no emotions. That's not good." And so I realized now I'm not looking for sympathy or empathy here. Like I was traveling the world with one of the best brass quintets like on the planet, getting paid really well to play the tuba. Like that's amazing on like 1,000 levels. But I realized that it was time for me to do something else. The road the road is hard. And especially after 14 years. So I decided I wanted to do something new. So the next phase for me was not going to be traveling a lot, because I didn't want it to be traveling a lot. So that was another thing where Lance and I, if Lance had said, "Hey, do you want to start a duo?" First of all, I don't think that we would have had anything interesting enough to say as a euphonium tuba duo to then suddenly be booked for 4 months a year. I'm not saying that no one could, but I don't think that we had anything interesting enough to say that the market would have just been like, we have to have you, at the prices that we would have, needed to justify it. But I didn't want to travel all the time. So then it was kind of like, okay, how can we get some traction from home? And it was like, well, wait a minute, a podcast, I think it's also important to note, as a side note, and always bring me back to the main point because I need that a lot. But we did not monetize the Brass Junkies at all for a very long time, like a very long time. We started Patreon pretty soon. I put it this way. Even now, I mean, our Patreon and our patrons are amazing, and it's like a community that we've built, and it's awesome. But like, yeah, we make less in a month from Patreon than far less in a month from Patreon than either one of us would make for a single gig with Boston Brass. So it's just kind of, and the money is great and it's really important, and we keep it all in Pedal No Media, so it all goes to improving equipment and to improving, and I mean, it's not crazy expensive, but you can see I have like a mic, an arm here that's like really nice and it's very easy to adjust and quiet. And
they're going to hear that you sound way different than the other guests who are using phone speakers or whatever.
Yeah, and so it's just like there's been a lot of improvements over the years. I've got a mixer. I've got a Zoom H6. We had to pay for the Zoom webinar account for the Academy, which is like when you get up to above 100 people is like $400 a month or something. I mean, it's like, it's expensive. But we didn't monetize the Brass Junkies podcast for a very long time, and now we are. But we just kept showing up over and over and over again. Which is also the way that Boston Brass started. I mean, for a long time, this was before I was in. For a long time, they were playing graduations and weddings and things like that, which there's nothing wrong with that. But that's sure as hell not what we were getting paid to go to Linz, Austria, or to go to Anchorage, or to go to, So, but you got to keep doing what you're doing for a long time generally to monetize it. Not always, but in general you do.
So you weren't monetized, and I think I know the answer to this question, but I'm curious. So what is the incentive then to continue doing it? Because a lot of people will see that you're putting effort into a thing, and you might not necessarily be getting a monetary reimbursement for it. So there's got to be something else driving that outside of just enjoying doing it, right?
Yeah, there are. I want to be clear that it is easy for me to say this as someone who, even in the middle of this pandemic that we're in right now, I am through some of which through me working my butt off and being really talented, but a whole lot of it is just dumbass luck in my life and in terms of timing with my career. I have no threat right now of not being able to pay my mortgage, which is not the case for a lot of musicians. I am, as Lance likes to say, I'm having no problems right now living indoors and eating food, right? Even with the world completely upside down, especially our corner of it. And if both of those are not slam dunks, then it's real nice for me to be like, well, there are ways to get benefits out of things other than just financial, and it still doesn't mean that point isn't correct, but I want to be sensitive to people, especially right now, who are just trying to get the money to pay their car payment, because if they can't pay their car payment, it's going to get taken away, and then they can't get to the job that's still not even paying for the car payment right now. But there are ways to, and I believe, I'm a tuba player, so I don't really know what words mean. I think monetize specifically means, how you make money off of things. There are value that can be brought to things other than direct monetization. For example, TEM. I was on a gig in Missouri with a group called Alarm Will Sound, which was unbelievable, one of the best weeks of my life. There was this big dinner this thing was through the University of Missouri. I started chatting up at this dinner was the director of the School of Music at the University of Missouri. It took us a few minutes, but it turned out she had played a gig with Boston Brass. It was one of the Christmas Kenton gigs. She was auxiliary percussion. So there was 20 people on the gig. So it wasn't like she was the percussionist and I didn't remember her or vice versa. And she said, no kidding. She said, what are you doing now? I told her about the two podcasts, and she said, wait, tell me about the entrepreneurial musician. Turns out that they didn't have an entrepreneurship position, but that they had they were bringing people in throughout the year from outside to talk about this. And she said, oh, wow, it might be good to have you come in to talk. And I was like, absolutely, that's something I do. She went home. The next morning, I had an email at 9:15 a.m. from her offering for me to come to campus for a day and a half that fall. This was 3 months later, paying me $2,000 to go to. Now, that's a lot of Patreon money, right? I can tell you until I'm blue in the face that I'm really into entrepreneurship, or I can show you how into it, because at that time there had been 50 episodes, and she saw who I had interviewed, and I had interviewed David Cutler, and I'd interviewed all of these really big names within that sphere, and she listened to some of it and said, this is great, and then she just boom, it was done, So TEM, at that point, I think I was probably making $30 an episode, which is $120 for a month of TEM, which when I was in college, that would have been $120 a month. Yes, I can use every last penny of that. I knew where there was an ATM near Northwestern that you could take out money in $5 increments, meaning that if I had $7 in my account, I could take $5 out before more money came back, because most of them were 20s. And so if you had $19, that was it. You couldn't get any money out. So I'm not trying to be flippant about $120, but for now, if you asked me if I would do if I would leave my house for a gig for $120, the answer will almost 100% of the time be no, just because. And there's some levels there. Like, I got to figure out my kid. Like, I got to figure out childcare. I mean, there's like a lot of layers there. But in general, $120 not getting me out the door. But at the time, $120 a month, which was not a lot, but it was like I was building towards something, right? And then all of a sudden, $2,000 is like, if I'm getting $120 a month, then $2,000 is what, like 15 times that, more 17 times that. So I suddenly, in one visit to the University of Missouri, which, by the way, I met the tuba professor that time, and he had me out for even more money than that 2 years later. And then I was supposed to go back again this fall, but that's been postponed because, like, if there isn't even going to be school, I'm not going out there for 2 days. So we're talking like thousands of dollars from that conversation, which were monetized by, and I didn't go into that dinner party saying, how can I extract some money from one of these guests? It was, we chatted up and it was like, oh, this is one of my passions. She saw it was one of my passions. And then, so yeah. And now, if you do a podcast, is someone going to like hear about it and then the next day offer you $2,000 to come to their university to talk to the entire student body? No, I'm not saying that. Of course, I'm not saying that. But what you can tell people you're passionate about fill in the blank, or you can show people that you're passionate about fill in the blank. And some people, if you can show people, I call it a digital paper trail, because I like calling it a paper trail because I'm old. But that's basically what it is. It's like kind of breadcrumbs. It's like you show somebody. And that there's a reason why the people who make money on YouTube talking about video games or are about gaming, or that make money actually playing the games, etc., those are people always, and it's not just because they're making money, so of course they do it all the time. Those are the people that show up over and over and over and over and over again. And I don't know a single one by name or face, but the people, like, if you're into gaming and you can think of, oh yeah, this YouTube channel, whatever, there's no way that they were monetizing at all when they first started. Like when they threw up their first stream on Twitch, or when they threw up their whatever, they had no audience, they had no monetization whatsoever. They just kept showing up, and people liked it, and it's also, you don't just keep showing up and then all of a sudden you're some gamer who's making $50,000 a year playing video games while people watch. You got to be interesting. You have to have like your own angle on things. But the common thread is you have to keep showing up over and over again. It's really important, which means you got to find something that you enjoy, right? If you're not doing something you enjoy, then you're not going to want to keep doing it in the early days when you're not really making any money. So you got to find something that is an actual passion, and then just keep showing up.
Yeah, man, it's funny because, like, I'm in the same circles, that you would be in terms of, like, we play the same instruments. I literally went to James Madison. I was going to school for euphonium, 2 hours away from where you are living currently. Mm-hmm. I had no idea who you were until I picked up the Entrepreneurial Musician.
Yeah,
and like, it's in that exposure. And this is the first, I don't know if you've realized this, but this is the first time we've spoken, like, face to face or what have you. I have your number, I have your email. We've corresponded, mm-hmm. But 5-6 years ago, unless I picked up your podcast, I wouldn't have known who you were, and we are in the same circles, right?
Hey, that's worth shouting from the rooftops, because I was getting paid well to play the tuba all over the world, and you'd never heard of me. Right? Yeah. I went in my Boston Brass days, thousands and thousands of times I was asked to sign an autograph, and you had never heard of me. And so you cannot be famous to everybody or even close to it. I interviewed somebody for TEM who I was actually sent a PR email by somebody on their team, and it was really good, because most of those I get are a disaster. They're really, really terrible. But her name was Kathy Heller. And I interviewed her, and I had never heard of her. And she has kind of like a business type podcast, which at that time, she was like, every single episode of hers was getting like 100,000 downloads. I mean, and this is like, I listen to podcasts, and I'm like, and she's unbelievable. Like, she blew my mind. It was really great. And she's only gotten way bigger now. And I told her on, and she said, preach. Like, I was like, I'd never heard of you until your person emailed me. And there are 20 reasons why I easily could have heard of you, and I'd never heard of you. So you just got to keep showing up, and you never know when something like that, when you're going to get a break of some kind. But if you only show up 12 times, like, well, yeah, nobody's going to really have heard of you, you know? Like they're just they're just not. You got to keep showing up.
So you mentioned doing like if you don't like something, you don't necessarily have to do it, like, right? And you probably, if you're trying to make it something that you're doing on a regular basis, you probably shouldn't do stuff that you don't like if you're in a position where you can. So my question is, what are the things about what you're doing with Pedal No Media that you like the most?
It's a good question. I think I'd have to say the people that I'm working with. I mean, I had this morning, when you and I set up this time, we said, I don't know, an hour earlier, I think, than what it ended up being. And after that, between when we set that up and now that we're talking, we actually moved the Pedal Note Media weekly meeting from Friday to Monday at 10 a.m. And sure enough, so I was on from 10 a.m. until 11:45 this morning. Was like all like, you know, like Google Docs and like with both of my partners, Lance Leduc and Will Houchin, who's our third partner. And then we've also added Abby Lannon to the fold lately, who's doing a ton of work for us. And I love all three, working with all three of them. Like a 2-hour, I mean, I've been in some meetings and I actually haven't been in any like this at my current employer, but I have been in some faculty meetings at former schools that I'm at that are like an hour, that within 7 minutes, I'm like grinding my teeth because like we're just being like talked over. I mean, you know, it's like, or there's a handout and then they read you the handout like it's like the first day of a freshman seminar. And those are like, it's a part of the job. I said I would do it, so I'm there. But those meetings, it's a one-way exchange of information, and it all could have been done in an email or in like an 8-minute video clip that you could have and you didn't need to make me go in and pay for my own parking and sit there, etc. With Pedal No Media, the people that I work with, if Lance has an idea that I don't think is very good, which happens all the time, his ideas suck. No, they're actually frustratingly good. But if he has an idea that I think, like, you know, if I say, I don't know about that, I think this, he doesn't take it personally. Like, because I'm not trying to, there's no benefit to me if like something works and it was my idea. Like, who cares, right? Like the Brass Junkies Academy summer workshop either was a success or it wasn't, and the team succeeded or the team didn't succeed. Now, if I never gave ideas that helped move things forward, then that's like a problem, right? I mean, then that's a sign that something is off there. But Lance is, I've also been in two kinds of chamber groups. A chamber group where I tell you, I say, Aaron, do you think that we could play this a little bit more separated? And where you, or let's make me the bad guy, where you say, hey, Andrew, I think we should try and play this more separated, and where I immediately go with like, you know, Aaron's trying to screw with me again. Or with saying, Aaron thinks that we, not even just the two of us, the whole group is going to sound better if it's more separated. Doesn't mean I always say yes, but in Boston Brass, we used to have a rule. You have to try it both ways before you make up your mind. And then sometimes we try it more separated, try it as is, and then before we even vote, you say, more separated sounded great in my head, but it turns out it doesn't sound as good in reality, so like I think we should keep it the way it is, or vice versa. Or at worst, we vote on it, and I vote for my version, you vote for yours, and if we're a trio and Abby votes for yours, then it's not because Abby's siding with you because she owed you a favor or because she's trying, you know, she just thinks that that's what sounds best, as do you, as do I, you know. And so that's a healthy chamber group. And I'm now in a business where it is a healthy business, where, where it's not, everybody is just trying to get us moving forward. There is no Will taking credit, which there's lots for Will to take credit for. There's no Lance taking credit. Like, the credit doesn't matter, right? It just doesn't matter. That's just ego, and ego is always fear-based. Like, maybe I'm not pulling my weight enough around here, so I got to keep pointing out when I am, and that's just, it's exhausting to be that person, which we all have been, and it's exhausting to be working with that person, which we all have. And so I'm not doing that right now at all, which is probably my favorite part about that, because those meetings fly by, even though they can be 2 hours long. So, yeah.
Lance is
Insane.
it's so I don't know if he knows who I am or what, but I will always join whenever you guys are doing a live stream or whenever he's doing a live stream. I try so hard to troll him because I know very much about him and I don't think he knows very much anything about me. And so like I'll join in with my handle AKCU. If I'll join into one of his like Instagram live streams and I'll be like, when I grow up, I want to be Lance LeDuc. And he's just like, well, I think you play euphonium. And it's so difficult to troll him because he has no reaction to it.
Right.
Except he's just a wildly positive person. And it's like frustrating. It's like, no, man, I want you to get on me. But no. And so I really like that you mentioned the checking the ego and that it's fear based and the need of the organization is to keep those wheels moving and keep that pushing forward. That's the homogenous, and it's so interesting that you mentioned with the Boston Brass. With that group, I mean, you've got a group of fantastic brass players, right? And a lot of people who are younger, like when you're getting you're going into undergrad or whatever, you're like, okay, well, if I just get good, I will join a good group and we will play good music. And you don't like, you're telling me that 5 of the best brass players, arguably some of the best brass players had arguments about art?
Sometimes.
And you never, you don't think about it. So you quit, when you left the Boston Brass, you started this stuff, and then you never played tuba ever again, right? You just never, you put it down, you said this isn't for me, and you never play anymore, right? Because you can either be a professional player or you never play at all, right?
Yeah, there is that, yeah. Except for when I get to play with the Baltimore Symphony or the National Symphony or recitals or solo at the U.S. Army Blues, or I mean, I've been really there's been an embarrassment of riches for me, but yeah, it's not binary. I have now what's called a portfolio career, which is not a term I came up with, but I use it all the time. Which the first phase of my career, which was, there were times when Boston Brass was 100% of my income during those 14 years, especially early, which more than paid all of my bills. I mean, that's a really good gig. And then there were, I started teaching a little college, but in case any of the young people don't understand this, adjunct college teaching pays like absolute crap. It's like
it does.
So just be aware of that it's going to be a very, very small percentage of any kind of a living wage that you have, unless you're in the absolute middle of nowhere, and then it's all you would do, because there would be no art scene, there would be no, and so just go into that with your eyes wide open. I'll end that rant right there. But like Boston Brass was at worst like 90% of my income during all 14 of those years, and paid for the cars and the house and like everything, which was amazing. Very, very fortunate. Now I have, in this pandemic, I have fewer of them, unfortunately, although some new ones have cropped up even since March. But I have now like 18 income streams. I mean, that some of those are, teaching at Shenandoah is like, if I was trying to live off of that around here, I would have to live in the woods. I mean, not woods that I owned. So I think that'd be squatting in the woods, and Shenandoah for adjunct actually pays really well. But that, and then combined with the private lessons that I teach on the side, which I only teach 1 day a week, which is a decision I've made because I could teach every day of the week around here, and then I'd never see my kid after school. I'd never see my wife. We'd never eat dinner as a family. So I teach 1 day a week, and I charge a lot of money for lessons, like relative even for this area. I don't think I'm like the very, very, very top rate, but I'm close to it. I'm just kind of like, if I want to make it worth my time, and I'm also, if I may be frank, I'm darn good at it. So it's like, so I'm going to charge accordingly. And I have some people who hear the rate and then they don't email again, which is fine. That's also, if no one ever says no because you're too expensive, you're not charging enough. Let me say that one more time for young musicians. If no one ever says no because you're charging too much, then you're not charging enough. Because if I charged $30 an hour for private lessons around here, I could teach. I bet I could teach 60 hours a week if I wanted to. I mean, I could teach 60 hours a week, which would be a lot. That's $1,800 times 4. It's like, we're talking like $7,000 a month. Like, that's a good, I charge $120 an hour. Like, if you want you're a middle school kid, you want a 30-minute lesson, it's $60, like, which is not cheap, but like, that's what I charge. And some people pay it, other people don't. But when I'm not teaching, I get to hang out with my kid, or I get to be doing pedal no media stuff, or I get to be talking to you, or I get to be like, spending time with my wife, or playing with my dog, or practicing the tuba, or, etc. So, but yeah, it's so pricing is really, really, really important. But again, now I've got this portfolio career where I make some money from private teaching. I make a big some money from Shenandoah. I have a mouthpiece deal with Parker Mouthpieces, which gets me, that's, again, nothing to live off of, but I get a check every once in a while. That's always a nice thing to get in the mail. I'm an educational ambassador for Jupiter, so under normal times, I do take some trips. I do some speaking engagements. I do some residencies at universities where I play. Now we're doing online live events, which that Summer Academy was the first of like many. We've already got like a string of them planned out moving forward. Some that are going to be happening actually pretty soon. I do music business consulting. Which I charge even more for that because that helps people make money. People will people will spend money to help you make money. So, and then I also have freelance work, but I'm able to be finicky about that, which again is a position of privilege. But I don't just I'm not going to play a $150 quintet gig in downtown DC when I would have to get a babysitter to put my kid on the bus, or to get him off of the bus, I would have to plan for, because traffic around here is so bad. It'd be like a 4-hour commitment for $150. Like, I'm not going to do that. Like, I'm just not going to do that because I can take that time and turn it into more than $150 if I make that trade-off enough times. So, and the beautiful thing about a portfolio career, by the way, is that if some income streams disappear, like say in the middle of a global pandemic, that I can put the pedal down in other areas, right? Like a lot of other areas, like this platform. And we've been building this Brass Junkies platform for like 5 years. If we had started building that in, April 1st, it would not have worked how it just worked. But yeah, so you can kind of put the pedal down on certain things, take it off on others. The one thing that you can't scale, that I can't scale, that no one can scale is time. You get 24 hours in a day. I said that to my son the other day. Not the part about scaling, but he said, well, no, what about the night? And I was like, well, no, day, not daytime. Anyway, he's 6. He's not very bright. But yeah, you get 24 hours, I get 24 hours. So it's really important for young people to understand that anytime you are saying yes to anything, you are saying no to something else. Let me repeat that. Anytime you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. I also want to be clear. When I was at Northwestern, if I, again, may speak frankly, when I showed up, I was one of the best tuba players at Northwestern University the day I arrived as a freshman. There were people that could do some things I couldn't do, but Rex Martin, my teacher, has since told me that there was chatter the day I got there. Guess how many paid gigs I played in 4 years at Northwestern? I played with Civic Orchestra as a sub for 1 week, and I then played 1 quintet gig, which I crushed, and they were like, "You're amazing," but then they never needed another sub while I was there ever again. And I played 1 tuba quartet gig that was through the school. That was the sum total for 4 years at Northwestern, and I could play well enough to have been freelancing in Chicago, the day I got there, and I made maybe around $600 total in 4 years. So if you had offered me a $150 quintet gig in college and I had to deal with traffic and all that, I would have been like, of course I'll do that. I mean, I would have I would have sprinted to get my dress clothes and then showed up a month early to be prepared, So I want to be clear. And I'm not better than that gig now. It's literally a math issue, right? It's okay, if I say yes to this, what am I saying no to, and then it's just like, you write the positives and the negatives, figure out the negatives right now for that gig would be. Now, if you tell me that gig is going to be with Mark Gould on trumpet and with Wayne Dumaine on trumpet and with Jen Montone on horn and Joe Alessi on the trombone, like, I would run to, and I've played with all of those people before, but I would still run to go do that because that would be amazing, right? And they're all friends of mine. So everything is about decisions. And when you have a lot of options, you get to make more decisions than when you just do this thing or don't do this thing. Don't think binary.
So TM episode 204, Why You're Probably Not Charging Enough, is one of my favorite episodes. It will be linked in all the description and all that kind of stuff because it talks about exactly what you mentioned in a nice 15-minute compact thing.
Awesome.
So a couple things. One, I'm pretty sure your son is more clever than you think because he's able to put up that defense shield before you're able to attack him at all times. Playing the game of I win when you know you can get away with the game I win is a very good one.
I love making fun of him because he thinks it's funny, and I whenever baby pictures come up, I tell him that he used to be a completely useless baby, which he just laughs every time. I'm like, you're helpless, you couldn't feed yourself, and he just laughs. He's like, tell me more. Yeah, it's like, yeah. Anyway,
so Mr. I have a portfolio career and I play tuba all the time. I have a podcast and I teach at a university. So my question then is, okay, so you've got to have like, where's your doctorate in tuba from? And then where'd you get your performance certificates from? Right? Because you have to have every degree in order to do these things, right?
Well, as I like to say, I started 3 degrees. I pursued 3 degrees. I only caught up with one of them. So I dropped out of my master's at Arizona State. I was Sam Palafian's graduate teaching assistant, which was this amazing gig. I was at that time all freshmen and sophomores. I was teaching like the kid who won the first chair Texas All-State. I was teaching him when I was 22, which was amazing. They were all taking lessons with Sam and with me as the TA. So they got 2 lessons a week. And I was getting paid, not much, but at that time, compared to where I grew up in Boston and Chicago, like living in Phoenix was basically free. So it was like, it was great. But I got the call from Boston Brass, and I started subbing with them, and I started subbing with them so much that I got kicked out of school. It was amicable, but Sam said, do you want the good news or the bad news? And I said, just tell me and I'll clean it up. But he said, Hitz, he said, you just got kicked out of grad school. He said, congratulations, man, you're doing it. So, and it was all very amicable, but like, if his TA was never there, then it meant he didn't need a TA. So, and Kelly Thomas, may he rest in peace, was already in the wings to take over for me at the end of that year, and he just took over early. And then my plan was, when I got off the road, I was teaching at George Mason at the time, was to get my master's there for free. I wanted to do arts management, which was the closest thing to like a business degree that they had. And I took 1 semester and I really loved it. And then I was like, I'm not doing this. It's like way too much. Because I was in Boston Brass long enough that all of my graduate credits from Arizona State had disappeared. Like it was like I did like 3/4 of that degree, and it was like it never happened. And I am 100% done with any kind of degrees at all. I just don't have any interest in them. And getting a master's degree is a really good idea for a lot of people. Getting a doctorate is a really good idea for a lot of people. However, I would beg you, like plead with you, don't get a master's because that's what comes after an undergraduate degree. If you're in high school, I would plead with you to not just reflexively go to college the August after your high school graduation. I think that there are so many people who would benefit from 1 year, 2 years, 4 years later. I say this all the time to people. If you want to be an orchestral tuba player, you need to bring some pretty serious hardware to the table. Like you need to have got at least $20,000 in horns, like at least, and I'm kind of rounding down there to really You got to have. Luckily, and I'm a Jupiter XO artist. I love their tuba is amazing. But if you want to go orchestral tuba, like the new Eastman 6/4 is really good, and it's pretty cheap, relatively speaking, compared to what it's in the market with. But even that's going to cost you, I don't remember what it is. It's like 10, 11, like it's a bunch. And then you need to get a good F tuba. You're talking 20 grand in equipment, and you are not going to beat Seth Horner and Seth Cook and Derek Fenstermacher and Aubrey Ford and like all of these people who like the semifinals for the St. Louis Symphony audition like a year and a half ago was like 8 people that all had jobs who all had like way more than $20,000 in tubas. So don't let me tell you you're not going to beat them, but like wow, is it hard to do that without their equipment. So here's the thing, and this is a big if. Some of you will not have this as an option. If you live in a household where you are able to stay home for another year, there's a lot of ifs there. It's like it's not abusive in any way, right? Like, like this is like a healthy place that you are allowed to stay in and that they would say, okay. And I'm talking non-pandemic times, if you were to say get a job at Starbucks, let's just say, that like, let's say if you work like full-time at a job like Starbucks, how much can you make in a year at Starbucks? I'm guessing like 25,000, 30, like somewhere in there. Like, if you're like really full time at a job like that, if you were to take 10 grand of that 30, and I don't think you'd necessarily make 30 post taxes. I'm talking in generalizations here, right? So you take 10 grand of that, and let's say that you drive up, if you're here in D.C., you drive up to Boston 4 times to take lessons with Mike Roylance. So you not only are getting lessons with Mike Roylance, but he's going to see you have a lesson with him, and let's say the lesson costs $200, and then it costs you another $100 to get up and back, and you sleep in your car because you're young. So it's like $300 a pop times 4 is like $1,200, right? You take a lesson with him in September, and then you go back to visit him at the end of October, 6 weeks later. He hears that you've worked on every single thing that he told you to work on and that it's all significantly better. You do that 4 times, you've actually established a relationship with Mike Roylance, right? Like you actually know him, he knows how hard you're working, etc. You do that in Philly with Carol Jansch. You do that in Chicago with Gene Picorni. You do that with Alan Baer. You fill in the blank. You go down to North Carolina with Seth Horner, or here in D.C. with Seth Cook. Or Steve Dumaine. I mean, there's like, you could literally establish a relationship with like 5 major teachers on the East Coast and figure out who you like, who you don't. And then you can take the other 20 grand if your parents, and again, there's some privilege baked into this, right? I mean, this scenario is like if you don't have to pay rent, you take that 20 grand, the other 20 grand, or the other 15 grand, and you then take your $5,000 tuba, which ain't going to cut it, add 15. You've now got the equipment. And how much better are you after a year of this and of all of this traveling? And then you go to college 1 year later, and you are like a way better player with all of the hardware, and like, let's go. Like, no, I've never had a student take me up on that scenario ever. Because you have to explain to people, like, where are you going to college is the question, not are you going to college, right? And college is great, but don't take out lots of loans. Like, that's a really bad idea. You're going to be paying them back for a just depressingly long amount of time. But if you take that year or 2, and I also, you tell how old were you when you started undergrad?
Oh, 18.
Yeah, right after college, right? Would you have done better? I'm not asking you if you wish you had done it differently. You would have met all different people. I'm not saying that. But do you think that you would have gotten more out of college if you had started when you were 21 than if you were 18?
Oh, undergrad? Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right? So it's a no-brainer for me as well. And like I told you, I was one of the best tuba players at Northwestern the day I got there. It's not that I needed to be better, and I got a lot out of it, but I don't know a single person who has ever told me, no, I would not have gotten any more out of it if I had waited a couple of years. So just something to think about. And think, don't make there are so many assumptions that we make, like there is a path, right? That there is a path and that's it. And after high school, you go right to college. After college, you go right to your master's. And there are so many factors here, right? If you don't get your master's right away, then you have to start paying off student loans, which you might not have the money to. I mean, there's like a lot of layers here. I'm oversimplifying on purpose to talk in generalizations. And your best path might be to go to college right after high school, and your best path might be to go to master's right after college. But make sure that you're actually coming to that conclusion for Aaron, for Andrew, for Stacy, who's listening, not just because that's what everybody else does. Yeah, because these are big decisions.
Yeah, I mean, and I mentioned that because as somebody who is, I am starting my doctorate in the fall. Florida is being really great. They're allowing me to drive. I'm living here in Tampa, but I'm going to drive to Gainesville every once in a while to do the thing. And when I was trying to make the decision on whether or not to go, I called my master's person, Kevin Stees, and I was like, yeah, man, one of my biggest regrets is going to James Madison. And he just started laughing. And I was like, well, and it's not because of you. It was because I was 23. There was a ton going on in my life at that time, and I didn't take advantage of what I had going. And I thought when I got done with it, I'm done with school. I'm never going to go back. And then this opportunity popped up, and I feel like now is a good time for me to actually go to school and appreciate it and want it. And I've been in the workforce and all that sort of a thing. And the whole reason I asked you that is like, I'm not going to school because I think school will make me financially successful.
Right.
I'm going to school because it is something that I want to pursue, and there are things that I want to learn, and I think it will make me better in the way I want to be better, but that's not the path and the only path and the only way you're going to be able to do it, regardless of what other people say or what you might hear currently while you're in an academic situation.
Yes.
So I could unpack so many of the things you said, but I'm going to not take up a bunch of your time. The one thing I wanted to ask you before I let you go, so if you could go back, I mean, obviously your path wasn't just like straight and narrow. You didn't just go and get to be who you are today. I'm sure when you were 18, graduated high school, you were like, you know what, I'm going to host a mildly successful podcast about brass players. I'm sure that wasn't a thought.
No, it was not.
So what advice do you have for people who are kind of trying to figure out their place in the musical world, trying to figure out where they want to be? They're hearing a bunch of advice. I mean, we all deal with students who are being told that they can never make money in music. They're being told that they can make money, but they have to do a certain thing, or they have to be in a certain type of profession. What do you think on that? What is your advice for those people?
I have two pieces of advice. The first one is 4 words: define success for yourself. Do not define success as what your parents want for you. Do not define success for yourself as what your teacher wants for you or what they did. You have to define success for yourself. You might be interested in playing a bunch of music that is not easily monetizable. And what I mean by that is if you... there are some of the best like free jazz musicians in the world do not make a lot of money. Right? And some of them do, like Ken Vandermark in Chicago, has been making a living for a long time. But that's not the way to go about, I saw back in the day, I saw one free jazz gig that Sam Palafian did where he like took the mouthpiece off the horn and turned it around and was like singing into the tuba. I mean, it's like, but like, I'm guessing that was at a bed and breakfast in the Berkshires. I'm guessing he probably got paid $50 for that, when he was used to getting $1,000 to perform with the Empire Brass at that same exact time. Define success for yourself. Success may be having a quote-unquote real job. Maybe you become an electrical engineer, and then you get to play a bunch of music that you only play it because you love it and with people that you love, and you're not constantly worrying about monetizing what you're doing. Maybe it's that you have a teaching studio, and you need to be good at that. It's a very important job, but that enables you to then play a bunch of music that's not monetizable. You see where I'm going with this here. You have to define success for yourself, and euphonium is not military band or bust. It's not. And a lot of people will either... They don't usually quite tell you that, but that's what it's kind of implied, Has anyone ever had to explain to their peers that they were going to North Texas to study with Brian Bowman and that they then were going to go and join the Navy band, right? No, that's wow, you're amazing. Wow, you're really amazing, right? But if your choice was to, Lance LeDuc was in the Air Force Band, and then he quit because he hated it. And I know some people who love military bands, and some people who don't, and then people in between. I got no angle here. But Lance joined in right away. He was like, this is not for me. And right away, according to him, the Air Force Band was like, this guy is not for us. So he was in for 5 years. And then he ran away, and they were like, please, we'll hold the door for you. We'll help you stretch beforehand so you don't pull up with a hammy injury and, like, not leave. And then he joined River City Brass Band, and he then quit that, which is, again, another quote-unquote bad idea. He then joined Boston Brass. Then he quit that, which is, again, not a good idea. He quits everything, right? and not on bad terms, but he quits everything because and it's not that he was wrong before. It's that things change. That's the other thing, is that people change. Allow your goals to change. Quantify them. Just like you've got to define success for yourself. And Lance didn't have to explain to anybody when he won the Air Force Band job that he was taking it, because, like, you've made it at that point, right? Like, you're at a 2B Fordham conference, it's like, that guy's in the Air Force Band. That's a big deal, right? He did have to explain to some people why he was quitting. Like, why would you give that up? Like, that's a title. Like, you've made it. You've checked the box. Like, the societal, meaning our tiny society, has decided that that's an acceptable outcome, and you're just throwing that away. Which is no more, who cares about the box checking, right? Like, and so it doesn't really matter. Although it's funny, when I was on airplanes, and people would say, like, what do you do for a living, or at a party, and what do you do for a living? And I say that I play in a brass quintet that travels all over the world and plays concerts. Like, everybody is fascinated by that. And then one of the reasons I left Boston Brass was to become a stay-at-home dad. That was, like, my main job I went from signing autographs in Kuala Lumpur to changing diapers, and that was a choice that I made. And, and then that same person says, what do you do? And then I say, stay-at-home dad, and it gets real awkward, right? Because that's because they're like, wait, should I praise him? But I don't want it to be too obvious that I think that's a noble thing. It's like, that was what I decided I wanted to do. And I could have said I'm an entrepreneur or whatever. That was generally when I didn't want to talk. I'd just be like, I'm a stay-at-home dad. I'd be like, good for you. That was the the pat on the head. Good for you. You got to define success for yourself, right? Some people are like, who would give up Boston Brass? That's insane, right? Other people get it. Nobody's ever going to get everything, right? The other piece of advice is that you have to be remarkable. If you want to make a living as a teacher, as a performer, as a composer, as a whatever, you should do, Seth Godin talks about this, do a 100-day challenge. And this is some tough love right here. Do a 100-day challenge, which is whatever you do, if you write blog posts, then write a blog post every day for 100 days and share it. If you write music, 100 days, share it, podcast, whatever. And then on the 101st day, don't share it. And, don't put anything out in the world. Don't tell people you're not going to put anything out in the world. Did anybody notice that you stopped? And if they didn't notice that you stopped, then, if nobody's going to miss you, then you're going to have a very hard time monetizing it, right? Like, a very hard time. Now, when you first start, nobody's going to be able to not live without you, right? Menozel Brass does not have any problems going into grocery stores in Vienna and getting bombarded by people. But if Menozel announced that they were done, our tiny corner of Facebook would absolutely implode, right? I mean, would implode. There would be just tribute after tribute after tribute. And there are a bunch of brass players, keep this in mind to circle back to 45 minutes ago, who are listening to my voice right now who've never heard of Menozel Brass, right? They just haven't. And that's a rabbit hole that's an amazing place on YouTube. But if nobody's going to miss when you're gone, then it's going to be a very hard time. So you have to be remarkable, which is worth remarking about. And I would say, and again, this is kind of tough love, but if the only thing that you're going to offer the world is playing the crap out of standard euphonium literature, which I also don't want to minimize how difficult it is to play the crap out of standard euphonium literature, then that's not remarkable. It's just not remarkable and there are not 1,000 people in the world that can play the crap out of all standard lit, but there's also not 3. It's not like it's going to be like DeMondre and David Childs and you, right? There's way more than 3, right? And I also don't want to make it sound like that Hiram Diaz is like offers nothing different than DeMondre, who offers nothing different than Gail Robertson, who offers no. But in the eyes of most people, if they hear those three people play pantomime, then it's like they say about Hiram, they go, "That's an amazing euphonium player," and then they hear DeMondre and they say, "That's an amazing euphonium player," and they hear Gail and they say, "That's an amazing euphonium player." Right? And yeah, there's some people who are going to have some, maybe I enjoy Gail's interpretation a little more than DeMondre's, or I like I don't, Hiram's is speaking to me for some reason a little more than Gail's does, or whatever. But in general, that's just three really good euphonium players. And if your potential customers don't have any way to differentiate between, Aaron's podcast is good, Andrew's podcast is good, and then podcasts you don't really charge people for. So let's go back to the playing example. The three of them are all great, right? And then the only differentiator at that point is price point. That is a race to the bottom. If you're fungible, if everything's interchangeable, that's a race to the bottom. Because if DeMondre says, "I'll do the gig for $1,000," and then Hiram says, "I'll do the gig for $750," and then Gail says, "I'll do it for $600," and then DeMondre says, "I'll do it for $550," etc. And then all of a sudden, like, Gail gets the gig for $425, and and she's not making a livable wage, right? Like, nobody's happy at that point. And so now, if you do something different, if you are well, Gail is a perfect example. When she was in the Tuba Fours, which she was one of the founders of at Disney, she did all the writing. I mean, that's a remarkable group, which most people have never heard of. But that was a really remarkable group, a tuba euphonium quartet that sounded unlike any of the rest. And her writing is very, very... Somebody needs a remarkable tuba euphonium quartet. Hiram could put one together, but they're not going to Hiram. They're going to Gail because she has a thing, which is already a thing, and is very remarkable, and then she's going to get that gig over DeMondre and Hiram, even though both of them could absolutely put something together. Does that make sense? It's like, so she's got something that is remarkable already. And DeMondre and Hiram both have kind of their own, all three of them are actually quite remarkable in their own ways and have kind of different takes, and they also play different kinds of literature. So my advice is the way to get remarkable is not to get 3% better at your instrument, which is very important. And you're not going to be able to play the euphonium like David Childs does unless you do all of the work that David Childs has done, like, period. And even if you do all the work, you're still not guaranteed that you're going to be able to play the euphonium like David Childs does. But don't focus on making it 3% better. Make it remarkable. Like, do something that's different than everybody else in conjunction with getting 3% better. That's how you make income always follows impact. And if you're just another euphonium player who can play the crap out of pantomime, then you get at the back of the queue of like the 500 people in the world that can do that, right? I mean, like any graduate student who's in a good program can play the crap out of pantomime if they prepare it. So it's probably more than 500 people in the world that can do that.
I judge solo and ensemble here in the state of Florida, and I probably hear 10 really good pantomimes a year from 17-year-olds. So
that's what we're talking about, right? So if you had some new interpretation of it, or you do that, but you also do, it's Aaron, he also does this other thing, which a bunch of people won't want. But if I do want it and I got the checkbook, then I write a check to Aaron because he can do that thing, and DeMondre might be able to, but he doesn't do it like Aaron does. So, yeah.
And people know you for doing it. That's absolutely true.
You got it. It's worth remarking about. Yep.
So, before I let you go, I do want to put a huge thank you on there. You have no idea about this because I've never told you about this, but my YouTube channel, this podcast, all that everything I've worked on in terms of the social media stuff. When I was done with graduate school, I was a bartender in Virginia, got a job working a middle school band in Miami, quit that because I absolutely hated it, sold a Blu-ray player so I could get gas to go live on my friend's couch in Tampa. Oh. And then, so I started teaching private lessons, and I got the studio up to like 2030. And then I was like, what do I do with the rest of my day? Because I can't start teaching until school's done.
Right.
And then I fall into the entrepreneurial musician by way of Brass Junkies. And then all that stuff starts, right? And so this stuff doesn't exist without the work that you and Lance have done. So I want to make sure that I personally thank you guys from the
Awesome.
bottom of my heart that, you know, like a lot of work that I'm very proud of would not have even existed without your inspiration. So
That's
want
awesome.
to make sure you know that.
Oh, that's great. Cool.
All right, man. Hey, so before we go, would you like to sign us off?
Yeah. How do you want me to sign you off?
So I have a stock one, but if you have a little catchphrase or something you like to use, you're more than welcome to use that.
Well, no. What you tell me what the stock phrase is, and then I'll sign.
All right.
I'll sign off.
So just you introduce yourself and say, "Be happy but never satisfied."
All right. This is Andrew Hitz, and be happy but never satisfied.
Hey, awesome. Hey, man, thank you.